Devon possesses the second strongest pronation only behind Levan, and even Levan got caught off guard in that first round. Devon attacks the arm of his opponent via positioning of his entire body in such a way that allows him to exert force without even moving his own hand. That technique involves leaning backward and downward in a squat position. The pronation lift skyrocketed his ability to not get supinated. His pronation lift demonstrates 147.4 pounds back pressure at the very minimum. Those are submaximal lifts and he's quite overtrained. I would guess a hair over 167 pounds if you give him a week to rest. The pronation lift is around 4% easier on the elbow flexors. The hardest pronation lift Devon has done is 156.25 pounds at 10 to 15 degrees above parallel, not 160 pounds 23 degrees above parallel. The normal anatomy of the top roll is that the pronation strength transmits through the thumb and knuckle. So what are the benefits of putting the fingers around the opponent's hand circumference? Well, basically, the index and middle fingers are important for pronation stabilization. The fingertips are conveying the pronation force on a wider part on the opponent hand, near the thumb pad. To get a more clear idea, just look at the multi-spinner. It's nearly impossible to engage pronation without containing the tool with your fingers. You can notice that Devon's fingers here are leaving a hollow space underneath them, making a 90 degrees angle with Georgie's hand. This angle allows the pronation force to be applied at right angle, which is the most effective. It's different from fully containing the opponent's hand without leaving a space underneath. He enters a king's move from the center, and it can also be considered as a defensive and offensive move at the same time. He uses this technique when he already knows that the other arm wrestler is stronger than him. This move forces the match to be about hand control, and I do think that no arm wrestler can hook him from this position, even Levan. Devon has done an unlimited amount of pronation work over the years, and that has led to permanent pronation of his arm, starting from neutral. Only Levan was able to supinate his arm in the last few years. That speaks volume of his strength. Even with a supinated arm, he can still pronate. False starting is one of the worst cheats there, is because it sways the match massively in the false starter's favor. I've dealt with king's movers who do this as well. They surreptitiously load back pressure by moving their shoulder and elbow back right before the ref says go, putting pressure into the lower strap and getting me dragged across the table before I could even react. The ref is only focused on their hand and they see that their hand isn't moving. However, by moving the shoulder and elbow back, the pressure is already being loaded into their lower strap before the match even begins. The supinator muscle is only active during unresisted supination, the forearm supinating by itself, and in an elbow extended position. As soon as you flex your elbow and there's someone pulling on your arm creating resistance, it's the bicep doing all the work. Supinator always acts together with biceps, except when the elbow joint is extended. It is the most active muscle in forearm supination during resisted supination, while biceps becomes increasingly active with heavy loading. When a hook fails, it's always because of a lack of either finger containment, cup, bicep, pronation, internal rotation, or back pressure. It's never because the supinator muscle is lacking. If you want to train the supinator muscle for balance, then sure, that's reasonable. Just don't train it in the hope that it will improve your hook game in any way. In order to continue progressing in strength, you need to consistently switch up your training. Our bodies are incredibly good at adapting to the environment, which is very helpful, but also will eventually impede fitness progress if you don't change it. Table time is critical for arm wrestling ability. There are plenty of folks who are great at lifting weights but get demolished on the table by a smaller person who trains just arm wrestling. Static supination with body angles avoids exposing the bicep. Coming into a hook or press can help. The chopping motion in a low hand top roll is also helped quite a bit by having strong supination, but your fingers need to be able to handle it as well. Supinated arm is in a bad position when you are at the losing side of the table. Your palm turns up. When winning or slightly winning, then the supinated arm provides your palm showing your face, which is desirable in hooking. Rising is his most crucial asset. Without proper rising, he cannot hold the opponent in the king's move. He tells every time about rising power, and this goes popular. It is important, no doubt. You must work at it. But if you are not a king's mover or up-pressure type top roller, it won't be in the top 5. You get called for lifting your elbow in the strap. Because Devon is the golden goose and no referee would ever foul him out in this setup more than once in a pro super match. Devon will pull back, and if you don't squeeze, he's going to move his hand in the grip to a better position and gain height. The ref will put him back to center, but the advantage is already gained. Then you'll grab upwards to level it. Erms has the strongest back pressure, took Devon's riser, and still couldn't compromise his pronation. Georgie's back pressure is 30% weaker, and he was able to compromise Devon's cup. There shouldn't be such contradictory examples between such massive back pressure gap if pronation only accounted for 10%. He's forced to contain that way because his riser was compromised slightly. Devon always locks his radial deviation before the go. The concept of not holding on riser, as Devon explains it, allows to concentrate force in the most disadvantageous lane for the opponents. The philosophical explanation to this approach states that it is not necessarily putting your opponent in a bad position, but putting your own structure in a good position. When you rise, you're not actually attacking any part of the opponent's chain. Forget about two meats fighting each other. Think about it as if you're resisting a force that's trying to make your wrist tilt in an ulnar direction. In other words, your wrist is trying to resist being dumped down. I strongly believe that riser have no specific counter. If you want to fight a strong riser, you have to apply force in multiple directions. The brachioradialis assists pronation. It doesn't dominate it, and once you're in a neutral position, you're using the other pronators isometrically to maintain position resist supination, and if you work a muscle that does some function, then you're working that function. Considering how simplistic and minimalistic his training is, and the fact that he can still hang arm on arm with all these monsters benching and curling hundreds of kilograms, just goes to show that he knows his craft. Pronator is the defense against cup. When someone actively cups, it targets your pronator tears. If your opponent's cupping is stronger than your pronator, you will be turned palm up, in other words, supinated, which is a massive disadvantage. Only a small percentage of pullers are still effective when they get turned palm up. You can have all the cup in the world, but if someone is able to simply turn you palm up, then it doesn't matter.